Alright, we're back and we're going to continue forward with our Flourish animation. Again, creating something that looks a little bit like this guy. Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 assets. So here's what we got so far. We've got the bottom flourish coming in, we've got the C coming in, and we've got a lot of work to do. So now we're going to continue forward with the rest of the Castlevania title. So we're going to call this C. We're going to duplicate it by hitting Command D. Come on. Command D. Then I'm going to hit Enter on the new layer, and then I'm going to call it Castlevania. Obviously minus the C. So what that's going to do for us is it kind of, in a way, splits up the Castlevania layers into two. So we've got two layers here that we can kind of mask independently and do some fun stuff with. So the C itself we're going to leave alone. We're going to go into the Castlevania and we are going to delete the C and C2 mask apparently. I don't need that one there either. Hit Command D one too many times. So all we have left is the outline. And then what we're going to do is this stroke that we have here right now, it's applied to none. I want to actually delete that stroke effect for a while. When I do that, you can see that the rest of the Castlevania type returns on that particular layer. So I've still got this one below it, but I've got this one too. So remember, this is the C, this is the rest of the word that we're going to be dealing with. So now is when I want to zoom in on the rest of the word, and I do want to go through the slightly painstaking process of tracing out all these layers, because again, the way the stroke effect works is it's going to trace anywhere we draw a line. So keep that in mind when you're drawing your type. So you want to go basically follow each little individual nuance of these letters, and it needs to be a complete path. So if we want the S to start over here, we've got to draw the line to follow exactly where we want it to go. So it's a little bit of a grind, but worth it in the end. So we walk up here. You can cross paths, that's okay. So we come down for the T, maybe a quick little jump out there to make sure we grab that point, and then straight up. Keep in mind, you can always kind of go over paths where you've already been, because we're just using this as a reveal. So when it's already revealed, you're not going to see any visual difference. But you want to try not to overlap spots where you shouldn't be. For example, this clip on the E, we don't want to reveal it until we've started at the beginning of the letter. So I might back that out and steer clear of that so that I can start. Actually, I'm going to backspace. I'm actually going to start the E down here. I doubt anyone will notice. I can end that there, and then jump back up to start the V. Let's start it right over here. And it can be somewhat crude. Your lines, I mean, they don't have to be perfect. If you're a fan, you can kind of do your little balances and tweaks. If you're a big pen tool aficionado, definitely doesn't hurt to be precise with your pen movements. But if you want to be a little bit rough in this particular phase, you can be. You can always clean it up later. Just make sure this is all one complete path. That's going to be pretty important later. So we continue, and I will kind of skip through this pretty quickly if I can. Back up to the top, up, back down to draw the rest of the N. We'll just go up and do the I. This is going to go by very quick. We're talking about animating this in maybe 30 frames tops. So any real mistakes aren't going to be, it's not going to be a whole lot of time to nitpick the mistakes. Okay, so we've drawn out our ASTLEVANIA. Mission accomplished. So now we've got this mask. We're going to, oops, wrong button, close that. We're going to come down here. highlight our mask layer, hit enter, and we're going to call this Castlevania Stroke. Remember, we still got that outline layer that just clips the entire text piece. So now we've got this Castlevania Stroke layer. That's the one we just drew out. So I still have Generate Stroke over here highlighted. If you don't, you can just type in Stroke in the Effects and Presets. I'm going to click and drag that over to the Castlevania layer. You can see by default it created the stroke around the outline mask. That's okay. Simply go over to our stroke layer, or our stroke effect, which is in our Effects and Controls panel, and just tell it to apply to the Castlevania layer. And then you'll see that it's picking that one instead of the outline one. Still looks a little bit ugly. That's because we haven't set the paint style to be Reveal Original Image. And once we do that, it's a little bit prettier, but it's still not quite what we want until we increase that brush size. So it's a three-part process here. We want to increase that brush size quite a bit. So for me, the way I did it, let's just go with an even 18. So again, path, make sure you set it to the one that we drew out. Paint style, reveal on original image, and brush size increases. Because basically what we're doing, as you can see, we're just kind of fattening that mask, and this stroke is going to serve as that mask. So you want it to be big enough to reveal those letters. Alright, so let's time this out. So we want it to start pretty much right after that C finishes. So right, boom. And so right at my 30 frames, I'm going to set my endpoint, which will be 0 at 30 frames. And then let's just say after 60 frames, we're going to be done. So set my endpoint to be 100. 100. Boom. So between 30 and let's do 100. So between 30 and 60 frames, those letters are going to draw on. Now it's a little ugly. Goes by pretty quick. You can see the S isn't super clean when it comes on. And that's because, here I'm going to show you how this thing's being drawn. That's because, as you can see, it's drawing these really quickly. So it's zipping by, and you can see like we're revealing a little bit of the S there because our stroke is so large. So we could clean some of that up, but it shows the process well enough for now. So we'll switch that back to reveal original image. It goes by so fast that you might not even see it. So I'm actually going to go to Effects, Stroke, and I might speed that up a little bit because it is so unclean for now. There we go. Let's just let it go by 10 frames. So we get the idea that it's being written on. Maybe we do a little ease in and ease out. So easy ease out on the first frame, easy ease in on the last frame, and that way it goes by pretty quick, and there's like this little hitch in the center. Cool. Lords of Shadow starts to play out and we're getting something happening. But now we need the 2. And we could probably speed up a few other things. But we're in decent enough shape. And that's that part. So let's come back and let's do the 2. The 2 is a fun part. So we're going to get into the 2. Highlight my 2 layer. And we're going to do it in the exact same way. It's now that we've done the hard part, doing all those letters, the 2 is going to go by very quickly since it's already by itself. So we're just going to start a stroke. Since this one's round, I am going to use some of the Bezier curves of the pen. I want this to go as cleanly to the bottom as I can. And then I want to walk it back up. But if I try to put one right next to this point, it's going to turn into my curve arrow. So what I'll do is I put one out kind of in the way, and then I walk it back. And I can move these. Oh, come on. Oops. So that's pretty good there. And then just walk this there. Get it real clean. Then, so I've got my mask, and again, we're going to do the same process. Apply stroke. Mask 1 is fine, we only have one mask. I want to increase that brush size so it covers up the whole thing, so it reveals the whole number. And you can see that I've got a document or a layer boundary here of that 2. That's fine because this doesn't really matter. And then we're of course going to use reveal original image. So we can get it right to the spot where the A finishes. And that's where we want our 2 to start. So we're going to drop this down, find our mask. We are going to find our effect, our stroke, and we're going to animate the endpoint. So endpoint is 0 to start, and say 10 frames. And then we type in our endpoint to be 100, and we can see it start to do its thing. So maybe we want this to be a little bit longer because it's kind of a part. Looking pretty good. Ignore that. Alright, so the 2's done. Now this Lord's Flourish kind of looks a little bit weird because we had to cut that out of the 2. Now if we were doing this production-wise, we would have solid assets. I just kind of had to hack and slash just for purposes of this example. So it makes more sense to say Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 than Castlevania 2 Lords of Shadow. So let's get that Lords of Shadow happening about right there. So this is where that happens. And I am just going to take these keyframes and we're just going to move them in. So that happens a little bit pretty instantly. So what Lords of Shadow basically started the second the words finish. So it goes by very quickly. Alright, so that's rolling pretty good. And just a few more things. In the example that I did, I put a couple of effects on that too. So I did, right when it animates, we can drop these. I added a brightness contrast effect, so I could kind of animate it on as a bright white. So let's see as this animates. Let's go ahead and, so I can see it first, let's go ahead and go down here, effects, brightness contrast. I'm going to set the brightness to be 100. And I believe the contrast, yeah, let's go ahead and set that to negative 100. If we set contrast to 100, it makes it a hideous red. So this kind of does that little bit of a kind of white cutout. That's kind of nice. And so as it's painted on in this kind of flashy white. And then, say, over 10 frames, then we can animate both brightness and contrast. Oops, step back a little bit. A few holding keyframes, then after 10 frames we can animate brightness and contrast back down to 0. So the result is that flash kind of zooms in. So we're getting somewhere. Going to go ahead and I would save your project if you're working on it right now, and then we're going to wrap up with the top flourishes. So let's go ahead and hide these layers, and we've got the top flourish. This is this big nasty beast. So I'm going to do one of these to show you kind of the process, and then we just kind of repeat the process with each one as you have time. So let's get started on that first one. And I want to do this first one on the left. So right as that C finishes, we're going to do this guy, this big swooping guy over here. So I'm going to draw out with the pen tool a mask that just sneaks these guys. So I just want these. And you can get a little bit crude down at the bottom, but you want to be real precise in there. So you can see how that creates that. Look, so I'm going to drill this guy down, find that mask, and I'm just going to call this guy outline, because that's kind of the holding mask, and then we got another mask that intersects this one to reveal it. So I'm create a new mask, and what we're going to do here is instead of it being added, it's going to intersect. So it is only going to reveal things when it intersects with another mask. And that's going to be super helpful because we want to animate it intersecting with this mask over time. And if we didn't have that, then you would have all this other stuff visible in it. So we're going to keep it to intersect, and we are going to start it immediately right here. We're going to animate this mask's path, and I'm going to start by getting him into a better spot, so pardon me. So we're just going to prep this guy, get him ready, because he's going to kind of go this way, so I'm just going to drag some of these down here so that the mask can more comfortably extend out that way. I'm going to change these to 25 pixels, so we got a little bit of a blur, and then let's just say that quick, we're going to animate this guy out. So we're just going to kind of do a wipe, simple and easy for now, and watch that work. And these go by pretty quick, so it's not the cleanest in the world, but maybe we can do it there and do an easy ease in, so there's just a little bit of blend to it. Click anywhere in the gray to deselect, and then we can kind of get a preview. So now we're getting somewhere. So that's the basics of it all, and then of course at the end, if you wanted to do some pan and zoom and animate the other effects, you could get something that looks a little bit like that guy. And in slow-mo. Easy peasy.